allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And now bring up Judy Riker for our prayer.
Please pray with me. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this opportunity to gather, and thank you for the ability to pray in public meetings like this. Some countries don't enjoy this thing that we have here, freedom of religion, and some countries persecute for prayer. But Lord, we know that you are in front of us, behind us, on every side of us, Lord. We know that every good thing that we have comes from you. We thank you for all the good things in our life, this beautiful place that we live, for this wonderful opportunity to join together as friends and co-workers here at the Chamber of Commerce Luncheon. Lord, we ask your protection upon all of us here, and especially right now we ask your protection upon all the elected officials, those running for office, and all the city and county staff, Lord. We always pray for their wisdom, but today let's pray for their protection, Lord. Thank you for this food, for the nourishment of our bodies, and keep us all healthy, Lord. Thank you for being our God and our Father. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen.
All right, the first group of people I'd like to acknowledge today are our elected officials. So today we have Judy Riker, our Speaker, State Representative Tom Leek, Mayor of Edgewater, Mike Ignatius, Deb Denny's Volusia County Council District 3 Vice Chair, Lynette Phillips with Tom Leek's office, and Lindsay Swindell and Cam Bradley from Senator Dorothy Hoople's office. Also, I'd like to thank our press for being here. Mark with Keys to Our City.
Yeah, Mark.
And Chamber board members, would you please stand up? Quite a few of them. And also, since this is an election year, I would also like to recognize all candidates that are attending today. Representative Tom Leek, candidate as well. Deborah Denny's, District 3 County Council. Edgewater Mayor Michael Ignatius, candidate as well. And for the New Smyrna Beach Mayor, Mark Beckwith. And Chase Hervey. All right. I think those are all of the acknowledgments. So, at this time I'd like to introduce our speaker. So, Representative Tom Leek is a product of Volusia County. He was raised in Ormond Beach, went to Seabreeze High School, followed by undergrad at UCF and law school at Stetson. He's been with an attorney for Cobb Cole for over 20 years and is currently the Chief Legal Officer and Vice President of Business Strategy for Foundation Risk Partners in Daytona Beach. He was elected to the Florida House of Representatives in 2016 and enjoys fishing, boating, college football, and spending time with his wife and his 2 daughters. Please join me in welcoming Representative Tom Leek.
Well, now that I know we have the press here, I'm going to have to take a minute and cross out a couple of these lines. Thank you all for having me. I enjoy being here. I enjoy New Smyrna a great deal. You all may have heard me say before that this is kind of the favorite boating destination for my wife and I. And I was here a week ago and gave a talk, but about 2 weeks ago I was just sitting at the bar, which quite frankly I prefer to be at. So, but that said, thank you all for having me. You know, I always like to take a moment and acknowledge Deb Denny's. You know, had she made different decisions, I may not be standing here today, but thank you. I appreciate it. I want to talk a little bit about the last term, the first term that we've had, which was 2016, and then talk about what you're going to see, what I think you're going to see going forward, and what I think is probably the most important thing that Chambers can do. In 2016, you all were gracious enough to have me here, and I talked to you about some legislation that I wanted to pass related to the Americans with Disabilities Act, and particularly as it related to how small businesses were getting hit by these drive-by lawsuits. Now, the greatest threat that I think Chambers have is to small businesses, and I think, you know, the big boys, they can take care of themselves, but, you know, who's going to be the champion of small business? And I think that that's where we need to spend a great deal of our time in the legislature, and that's been certainly my focus, whether it was workers' comp reform or the ADA bill. So they told me it would take a career to pass the ADA bill, which is really the only true tort reform that the state legislature has seen in about a decade. But what it did is it made businesses both more accessible, gave them the resources to understand what they need to do, and then also gives them protection from drive-by lawsuits on the back end. In the first year, in 2016, lo and behold, that piece of legislation became so popular that we passed every committee in the House unanimously. We passed the floor, I think, unanimously. We passed every committee in the Senate unanimously, and the governor signed it into law. So as it stands today, businesses who choose to take advantage of the program have the ability to do so, have the tools that they need, and also the protection that they deserve from drive-by lawsuits. So, thank you. It was big, and you know, quite frankly, I'm really proud of our team that we were able to get that done. So the next thing that I did is attack another thing that I think hurts a lot of our contractors, which are mostly small businesses, and that's the statute of repose. I won't get into what the statute of repose is, because if I do, you will fall asleep in your salads. But the statute of repose is essentially a time frame in which lawsuits must be brought. And there were some court opinions that basically left the back end of that open-ended, which was allowing you know, enterprising plaintiffs' lawyers to continue to bring these lawsuits well past the deadline. And so we went at it, and we went to close that loophole and to limit the ability of those lawsuits to last what was essentially forever. I got to tell you a little bit about that process, because on the one hand, you have the plaintiffs' bar. And the plaintiffs' bar is an incredibly influential organization in Tallahassee. And I think I want to stop here a minute and tell you what makes them so influential. They're organized, right? They all march in the same direction. They get on the same page, and they work their plan. They're organized. There are a number of interest groups up there. Most of them aren't as well organized as the plaintiffs' bar. So you have a very, very powerful plaintiffs' bar who doesn't want to see these types of things happen. Then on the other side, you have your local builders. I'm not talking about developers, I'm talking about builders, right? The folks who are swinging the hammer. And on that side, you know, they're getting hit with these lawsuits, you know, in some cases more than 10 years after they've finished work. So that's precisely what the statute of repose was designed to do. It's designed to limit the ability to bring those lawsuits after a significant period of time. And so, you know, of course the builders were in favor of me closing that loophole. Plaintiffs' bar wasn't so sure. And so what I did is what I frequently do. Is I said, okay, well, this is going to happen one way or another. This is your opportunity to shape what it looks like. And if you all can reach a compromise on what the legislation should look like, then I'll go forward. And I'll go forward with that compromise, and I will make sure that I do everything within my effort to make sure that no one tries to add things to it or change it at the last minute. It frequently happens in Tallahassee. Or somebody tries to kill it. And so through that process, it took a long time. I called them both in, the plaintiffs' bar representatives, the builders' representatives. We sat down in a room, and we just really kind of hashed it out. You know, how is this going to work? And every time you think that you've taken a step forward, Deb, it was like dealing with the DOT. Every time you thought you took a step forward in getting a project done, the next time you met, you had to go back and not only did you have to recapture that step, but you had to go back another step and try to go forward again 3 steps down. So it was difficult, but we sat down, we hashed it out, we came up with a solution that both sides were either equally happy or unhappy with, depending on how you look at it. But it worked. And what it did is it gave some definition to something that had no definition. So everybody knew what to expect going forward. Now, after that, I found myself in an interesting position. Because after that, some of the other folks that I would normally agree to, they had another issue that was not the same but related, and they wanted to add it to the bill. And I had promised, right? I said, if you guys can come to an agreement, I will fight. I will fight to the end to make sure that nobody messes with this. The most important thing is we're all playing in the same sandbox, and then we're coming together for a solution. Well, some other folks came in, which something that was probably right. It actually was right, and needed to be changed further. Another step that we probably should have taken, but it was not contemplated at the beginning. And the plaintiff's bar said no. We do not agree to that change. We do not agree to adding that to this bill, because if we add that to this bill, then we open it up, and all of a sudden that bill will start to look like a Christmas tree. Everybody start hanging ornaments on it. Fair point. So that put me at odds with some folks who I actually believe substantively were right, and forced me to go out and try, and successfully did, kill their amendment and their attempt to have the bill vetoed. So here I am, fighting against something that I think is probably right. But the issue was I'd given my word. And I said, if you guys will walk with me here, I'll make sure that I do everything to keep everything together. And we did. And so we successfully killed the amendment on the Senate floor. I mean, I wish more people could have this experience up there, because it's wonderful, but it's unique. But it involved leaving the House floor one day, walking across the rotunda onto the Senate floor to get a senator, to pull a senator away. Where's Dorothy? That's not that easy to do. Senators don't like to be pulled away by House members. But pulling a senator away and saying, listen, this is a bad idea. And she said, I'm still going forward with it. And I said, well, I'm still going to fight you. And so we fought that one out. Unfortunately, we prevailed. The next year, though, we came back. And I told the trial bar, and this time the developers again, listen, they have a point. The developers have a point. We need to fix this. Let's do it. And trial bar, I'll make you the same deal. You guys can come to an agreement on how to limit this. I'll make sure nobody attacks it. And the trial bar said immediately yes. And that one went much smoother. But the point is, up there, you're only as good as your word. And sometimes you end up doing things you never thought you would do, as far as resisting something that actually seemed like a good idea. But if you gave your word, you got to live up to it. And if you don't live up to your word, then they figure that out real quick, and you lose your ability to be effective. So we were able to get twice, 2 years running, some limitations on the statute of repose, which is another form of tort reform. The last thing that we did is something that I was honored to do, but Governor Scott called me one day and said, I think you would be the right person to run this bill, but I want to make sure that if the legislature, so only the state, if the state is going to raise taxes, that it has sufficient support in both houses. And so I think it should be a supermajority house at each house. And I thought about that, and I agreed. It's not the government's money, right? The government takes the money from the people. And so if the government is going to take the money from the people, they need to make darn sure that it's justified. And so we passed that through both houses. And there was some pushback on it that said, well, if you do that, aren't you really just hamstringing future legislatures so that they won't be able to do it in times of an emergency? We had already done the analysis, and you have to forgive my numbers now. I'm going to try to do it from memory, but I think there were, since 1986, there were, I think it was 90 plus instances that would have fallen within that definition. and 91% of the time, the legislature was able to pass the increase. So that what that tells you is when there is an emergency, the legislature recognizes it and moves in that direction. But the good news is you all sitting at home have to worry less about somebody coming in and taking your money. So, I think that leads me to my next point. I think that what we really need to look for in our elected officials, particularly in Tallahassee, and probably also in D.C., is folks who will stand up for small businesses. Because small businesses are largely unrepresented. It's not the small businesses who are hiring lobbyists to carry the message. So you need to look for that, because I think that's a hole that kind of needs to be filled. And as a chamber guy myself, I recognize that that's who our membership is largely. It's chambers, small business. Which takes me to my next point, and what I think you all do well and need to continue to focus on. I was just telling my wife and my daughters we're just on vacation. I was supposed to be there, but let's not talk about that. They're just on vacation. They're coming back today. I was supposed to pick them up from the airport, but I'm here. So again, let's not talk about that. But my daughters are 21 and 19. All right, and so we are confronted with that stage in life where your kids are not necessarily living with you, but not on their own. Trust me, not on their own. But we look at it, Michelle and I look at it, and what's important to us is this whole mortality thing. So your kids are going to go off, and I tell you, when your kids go to college, they come back for the first summer, then they never come back again. We've had one in that situation so far. It's been true. But you got to give them a reason to come back, right? So there's got to be opportunity. And when I look at our local community, and particularly today, and how well we're doing, I think, what are we doing to provide opportunity so that when our kids are making the decisions about whether to come back from college, we're at least in the running, right? There's at least a place to go. And I think we've done a fairly good job with that. I look at what the Speedway provides a great deal of opportunity. Look at what Brown & Brown's doing. They are moving their national headquarters here from across the country, creating 650 new jobs with a median income. Sorry, I'm going by my memory here, but I think a median income in the $50,000 range, which is not quite twice what our county's median income is. That's opportunity. That's the opportunity that we need. And you look at what Embry-Riddle does. How many of you are aware of the research park out there?
Oh, yeah.
Man, that research park can change our community. I mean, it could be just a transcendent thing, because the jobs that they're bringing in there, by the way, median income of about $80,000 a year, and one of two places in the country that has the resources for the type of research that takes place there in aeronautics, which, by the way, is very similar to the research that takes place in motorsports. Right? So there's a symbiotism there that we can take advantage of, and we've just started to leverage. So what I would encourage you all to do is figure out when you go home and you think about your involvement in the community and the things that you do. Think about do the things that I do on a civic basis. Do they have the end result of having more opportunity for the people that are here and the people that want to come here? And I think if we do that and if we focus on that as a community, then we'll have a place that maybe my kids will come back to. But my kids will come back to, and maybe your kids will come back to. So thank you all for having me here. I always like to leave room for questions, and we call it the abuse period, but I'm happy to take any questions you all may have. Sometimes I agree with you, sometimes I don't, but I'll always tell you what I think. Yes,
Hi, I don't have so much of a question, but just something which you said is absolutely true, is having a reason for our kids to stay here and to come back. And the 3 cities here in Southeast Volusia County are working together on an initiative called the Southeast Volusia Marketing Initiative, and working with Team Volusia. And we've actually focused on those aviation and aerospace and aerotech and all of the activity that's going on at Kennedy Space Center, and trying to figure out a way to glean component manufacturer or some piece of that pie, if you will, so that we provide more opportunities in Volusia County as a whole for our kids and for our future. So just something to carry on to Tallahassee the next time you're there, that the cohesiveness and the partnerships that we have is really unprecedented for our area.
That's great, and you know, the point there is that every new job that comes in creates at least one or more new jobs, depending on who you talk to. But they always create more new jobs. Great, thank you. Anybody else? If you don't ask questions, I'll just keep talking.
That's not really a question, but to follow up on Sam's point, we're also, our three cities and the Chamber, who's a member of the group, are working on to develop more workforce training, talking to the school board and talking to Daytona State, because manufacturing is a core concentrated industry in Southeast Volusia, and we want to just make industrial certifications available to high school students in the same way that college classes are now available. So that's our goal. We've been working on it for a couple years. The high school just opened a room for construction and manufacturing training, but we need more of that and just to be able to make those certifications available.
Well, I love it when a plan comes together, and I was waiting for someone to say that. So one of the significant efforts that I'm making now and trying to get some legislation together, working with a lot of the trades associations, is to encourage trade. And what we're finding, as somebody who sat on the Higher Education Appropriations Committee and a number of different education committees, what we're finding is your time to recovering your investment is much less in the trades, significantly, than it is for about 90% of the college degrees. And we still head down the path of a model that pushes people into college education. Never going to talk bad about college education, but we at least need to open our eyes to the fact that we have very few tradespeople or very many jobs that are paying very, very well. And so I'm working with some folks now that presented me with a concept for some legislation. Man, I hate committees and studies and those types of things. I just get tired of them. But what they're talking to me about is a group who, as its sole focus, would be the advancement of the trades in our state. Now, if you think about Volusia County's got a significant manufacturing base. We could be disproportionately benefited by that if it's successful. So that's one of the things we're working on. I would say it's not fully baked yet. There's still some work to be done, but in our chambers as well, if we can find ways to encourage people to get into the trades, we will be better off. Thank you for bringing that work well. Anyone else? All right, I will leave you with this. I told you 2 years ago how significant the waterways are to me, and my family has. I grew up on the water. My kids grew up on the water. My wife and I, we're on the water just about every weekend. Period. I think that your legislature, while not everyone agrees, I think that your legislature is unique in Florida, because most people in Florida, elected or not, take advantage of our natural resources. Right? We either hike, kayak, we boat, we fish, we hunt, but Florida is an outdoor driven economy. The result is that that there's very little difference, I would say, between the parties when it comes to the environment. And 2 years ago, I co-sponsored a bill with Randy Fine down in Palm Bay that would have required inspections of septic tanks prior to the sale of a house. Now that got a lot of people whipped up, because that's a significant disruption to how the sales process works, and ultimately that bill got watered down beyond the point that I'm really happy with, but we're making progress. We're making progress on it. I think you'll see more of that. And with the money that we have now put into Florida Forever, is about $100 million, with the money over the last 2 years that we are spending down in Lake Okeechobee, And we've got a huge fan up in Jacksonville, the Palatka area, actually, and Rob Bradley, with the money that they're putting toward our lagoons and estuaries in that area. I think we're going to see the Indian River Lagoon be a beneficiary of it. It's going to take time. Those things don't happen overnight, and the short of it is you've got more nutrients than you can filter. There was just a study released last week that I think it was FAU said that they try to quantify the damage that septic tanks are doing. We got to, at some point in time, we've got to get septic tanks away from imperiled waterways. I know Commissioner Denny's is working hard on it. We've had discussions about finding the projects, prioritizing them, and then let's move through them. But keep that in mind too. I think that you're going to see over the next decade, you're going to see a significant emphasis on the environment. So, if there's no other questions, I want to thank you all for having me. I appreciate being here. And have I gone way over my time? There's usually somebody who stands up and says stop. But, thank you very much. I appreciate it.